Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was skeptical at first, but if you're looking for easy ways to bump up your protein intake and you're open to making a really quick bread, then this viral cottage cheese flatbread recipe that's been taking over the internet is definitely worth your time. Using just 4 ingredients, this easy, delicious flatbread packs in 20 grams of protein per serving, and that is before you even stuff it with any of your fillings, which, by the way, I'm also going to show you one of my favorite sandwiches to make with this bread. But first, let's make the bread. So I've got my oven preheating to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is equivalent to 180 degrees Celsius, and I'm just going to prepare a quarter sheet pan, which is a 9 by 13 inch rimmed baking sheet, by lining it with some parchment paper, and this is so the flatbread doesn't stick. Then I'm going to pull out my mini food processor, which, by the way, is one of my top 10 kitchen staples. I use this all the time, and if you don't already have one, I'm going to tell you right now, the key to a mini food processor is to look for one that holds 4 cups instead of 3 cups. That 1 cup makes a huge difference, and I will, of course, link to the one that I use and love down in the description box below if you want to check it out. So into the food processor, I've got 1 cup of cottage cheese. Now, I'm using a low-fat cottage cheese because that's what I usually buy, but a full-fat cottage cheese would also be a great option here. Then I have 2 eggs and a 1/4 teaspoon each of garlic powder and Italian seasonings. Pop on the lid, and I'm just gonna blend this up till everything becomes nice and rich and smooth and creamy, just like I have here. This is what the texture is gonna look like. Next, I'm gonna carefully just pour this right onto my prepared baking sheet. And you just kinda wanna pour it around the center and then use a spatula to spread it out evenly around the sheet. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just want to get it as even as you can. Then I'm just going to pop this in my oven, and you're going to cook it for about 30 minutes. Depending on your oven, it might be 25, it might be 35. But what you're looking for is for the cottage cheese flatbread to have a nice golden color over the top and to be set through the center. Now, quick side note, if you wanted to bump up the protein content even more, you could swap those 2 whole eggs for 4 egg whites, which would be equivalent to a 1/2 cup of liquid egg whites if you're buying them pre-separated. I tried this myself and it works really well. The only thing you want to keep in mind is you want to spray the parchment paper with a little bit of cooking spray, just because the fat's going to be lower and you run more risk of the egg bake sticking. And then to switch up the flavors, I omitted the Italian seasoning and sprinkled a little everything bagel seasoning over the top. So this is another great option. This really reminds me of those egg life wraps if you've ever tried them from the grocery store. Very similar. Once the cottage cheese flatbread is done, you just want to let it cool for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then what I like to do is I just run a knife along the side of the pan, just for any of the egg that may have oozed over. We don't want it to stick when we remove it from the parchment paper. And then carefully, you're going to see this happens very easily. You're going to pull the parchment off of the cottage cheese flatbread, and it comes off very easily. And you're going to see that this cottage cheese flatbread, it's more like a crepe. That's how I would describe it. And while it's delicate, it's still very hearty, and it makes a delightful sandwich. Now, if you wanted to make this ahead of time and you wanted to make some extra, what I like to do is I cut each flatbread in half, and then I store it in an airtight container. I just layer parchment paper between every slice of flatbread so nothing sticks in the fridge, and then this will happily last in your fridge for up to 4 to 5 days. And then when you're ready to make lunch, you've got your high protein cottage cheese flatbread ready to go. So here's one of my favorite sandwiches to make with it. Start with 1/2 of a flatbread, which is technically what I would call 1 serving. And then on 1/3 of the bread is where I'm going to do all my building so that I can easily wrap this when I'm done. You always have to be careful not to overstuff. So I start with a couple tablespoons of tzatziki. You can either make a homemade tzatziki, which I'll link for you down in the description box below, or you can buy your favorite store-bought tzatziki. Then I layer on some fresh baby arugula, which has a nice little bite to it. Then I put some shredded chicken over the top. Now, again, you can make your own shredded chicken. I'll link my recipe for simply shredded slow cooker chicken down in the description box below, or you could just use a rotisserie. And then I like to layer on some sliced baby tomatoes and some sliced red onion over the top. Then I'm just going to carefully roll or wrap up my sandwich and slice it in half. And OMG, look at this. It is so simple and so delicious. Like I mentioned before, it's more like a crepe than it is a sandwich bread, but I do think it's really delicious and an easy way to boost up the protein content of any sandwich. Now, if you love high protein recipes and you enjoy cottage cheese, you're definitely gonna wanna check out my cottage cheese and vegetable egg bake next. It is so simple, it's so delicious, and it's perfect for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and meal prep. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you back here next time with some more clean and deliciousness. Cheers!